One of the most underrated cornerbacks in college football is with the Arizona Wildcats, Tacario Davis. We're going to get into his game and how he can move up the ranks in the 2025 NFL draft class. That and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson, always on the ones and twos. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I'm a senior draft analyst, and thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. You know I got to keep this intro to Mr. LSU himself, Keith Sanchez. You can find and follow him on X at TheTalentCode. You talk to him, baby.
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, 2019 national champ, man, and the other side to this dynamic duel that we like to call the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to start this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. DP, we are hopping into this scouting notebook, man, on this Tuesday. We're getting to cornerback Tacario Davis out there on the West Coast at University of Arizona. Then we're going to talk about your sleeper quarterback, Mr. Max Brosmer, that you've seen in person already. So you're getting early evaluations on this guy. And then we're going to finish this thing up with the explosive playmaker himself, the Purdue transfer. Yes, Purdue lost another transfer, right? And he's on his way to Oklahoma, Mr. Deion Burks. And I'm going to tell you how high I went on that grade. But before we get started, DP, why don't you get him with our title sponsor?
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. Tacario Davis, 6'4", 195 pounds. This young man, I think, is 19 years old, should be 20 soon. So he's a young pup in the game. But, Keith, this was a name that I think I heard a lot about after the 2024 NFL draft. And I'm excited to hear your thoughts on him. How high of a grade did you give him? And can he elevate even higher than the grade you initially gave?
Yeah, so I gave him a late second round grade, right? But at all this early, DP, sometimes it's put in context, right? Because if there are no other cornerbacks out there, then he's going to go higher than that, right? But I thought he was a pretty solid football player, but listed at 6'4", 195 pounds. They have him listed at, so he fits the profile of the mold of a cover three, right? Press, bail corner, zone corner. One of those guys you want him to turn around, get his eyes to the quarterback, right? And he kind of creates that triangle of him, the quarterback, the wide receiver, right? He has that length, and just like offensive tackles, right? Like he uses his length at the cornerback position to kind of smother those wide receivers early on in the process. Now, conversation is, I think it's twofold with the conversation, DP. First I'll walk through the downside. Downside is, hey, those guys are longer limb players, right? So the change of direction, the quick twitch, the ability to just consistently play man and stick with wide receivers in space may not necessarily be there, right? Like that's just like we always talk about body anatomy, right? Like that it just doesn't work the same. But I had a conversation just because you asked me what my grade is. Is there a premium on? Like, where does the premium lie when you talk about zone corners, right? These 6'3", 6'4" guys who play in a cover three scheme versus man-to-man corners. Does it affect your draft grade, right? Because just like they do the same thing with running backs, I'm gonna ask the same thing for corners. If a running back and you feel like, oh, running backs, you can get them, what's the word? Like at a certain point, you can get running backs third, fourth, fifth, and you finding high quality running backs in the back end of the draft. But are we not at the point, but do we have enough data over the past 15 years to where we can say, hey, cover three corners or these long, lengthy corners that we're going to put in zone, we can find those guys later on in the draft too. So I want to ask you that part for your process.
Yeah, I think it's I saw a stat that said 75% of the time NFL defenses have converted to using zone coverages. You know what I mean? Trying to keep the ball in front of them, keep eyes downhill, keep the routes and everything in front of them, not allowing the ball over their heads. And so I think with that situation, a lot of times it's going to depend on the athletic profile, right? When you have a guy who's athletic, like a Sauce Gardner or Tariq Woolen. Now, granted, Tariq, because he was a receiver for 2 years and stuff like that, like teams were like, oh, he's a little bit raw. We wait to day 3. Well, he was all pro as a rookie. Probably should have taken him day 2. You know what I mean? But I do think if you're a high end athlete and you play cover 3, I think absolutely you're gonna have a chance where you can be drafted earlier. But with teams playing so much more zone now, I could see corners slipping down the board a bit, Keith, where it's like, well, if there's especially in a deep cornerback class, right? If there's a deep cornerback class and you're a team that stays, for example, the Indianapolis Colts, Gus Bradley, he is striding true to his own scheme. He's drafting pure man-to-man corners like that. So it's like, well, why would I take cool? I think I had this conversation with our guy Peter Bukowski on Twitter before the draft. Like, he was like, yeah, they should trade up and take Brock Bowers. And I was like, yeah, no, because they need defensive help, edge rusher, cornerback. And he's like, well, there's other corners. I'm like, but Gus Bradley plays to his scheme. So he's not going to say, well, I just draft the best man-to-man corner that's available when I predominantly play 85% zone. So no, if it's a situation like that, I do think teams and coaches and coaching schemes like that will say, you know what, let me take best player available and that fits our needs, and I can get me a cover 3 corner that I know I can play press bail, I can play side saddle technique, back to the sideline, and put them in the best opportunity to succeed. And when I watched Tacario versus Travis Hunter, when I was studying Travis as a wide receiver, and the things you talked about, that he looked like a cover three corner. This
every bit of it. Yeah. You know what remind me of just early comp? Julius Brents. Like, I feel like I seen Julius Brents all over, like the exact same thing all over.
I like that a lot. And because I saw because I think he got beat on a go ball by Travis, and Travis gave him a little hesitation step inside and then exploded upfield. You know what I mean? So that burst, that acceleration, and stacked him. And I was just like, that's what I kind of worried. As soon as I saw that, I was like, oh man, you might not be a man-to-man corner.
Here we go.
Like, you might not be a man-to-man corner, because then I'm worried about the recovery speed aspect of it all, but also, can you stay square and tight to the receiver? Can guys jab step you out of the frame and then get vertical on you? And then if you can't recover, typically in the NFL, if that's Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, that's 6, man. Like, I don't want you to put you in that position. So I do think he's a cover 3, maybe cover 4. But I don't know.
I'll stretch it. I'll stretch it some to cover 4, but I just feel like primarily zone defender. I feel like in those and they played man at Arizona, in those man-to-man situations, and once you play man, they put them in different situations from the perspective of what happened is the offense, boom, they run their running back all the way out, right? Their linebacker runs with them. Now Tacario is reduced inside because he's kind of playing slot now, and it's like, you don't want that either, right? He's kind of grabby at the top of those routes and things like that. So put him in his most comfortable situation, which could be, what I feel like is zone defense, heavy zone defense. He with those Dan Quinn situations, right? The cover 3s, that's where he should be, and I think that's where he would thrive.
What's his ball skills like, real quick, Keith? Like, how like
solid
catch point?
I feel like it's solid. He needs to be facing the quarterback though, because I would love to know and it's going to be a process, right? We got to get through the next 8 months, but to get his athletic profile too, because if I had to guess early on, and this is just throwing stuff into the wind, but if I use my early eyes, right, and what I may see, probably right at a 4.5 flat. I don't know if he's a blazer, like a 4.3 type of guy. And like I said, this is very, 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 very early on. Just watching the film from this year. So if I had to guess, he's a 4.5 flat guy. So that puts you in position where you kind of have to have that makeup speed to where when those wide receivers get on top of you and you're talking about the ball skills, panic or patience, right? I thought there were moments where he panicked, grabbed, things like that. So he'd be interesting. I think he's going to split people as far as their grades, and I just know how I go about, whether a corner can play zone or man. Man is the more premium player for me, because I just think that's the more difficult thing and requires the higher athletic build. So we'll see. But DP, let's keep this thing going, man. I'm excited to talk about this quarterback from Minnesota, Mr. Max Brosmer. I haven't heard anything about him, haven't heard much about him, but is he going to tear it up in the Big Ten this year? Let's talk about him as a 2025 NFL draft prospect coming up next.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Guys, I know when we're looking at social media, right, you tend to compare our lives to others, right? I know it's hard not to do that. And you get caught up wishing that your life looked like someone else's. Guess what? Comparison is a thief of joy, and it's easy to envy other people's lives. But it might look like they have it all together on social media, on Instagram, on Twitter, but in reality, they probably don't. Therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have, so you can start living your best life. And if you live your best life, that means you're the best version of yourself. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/locked-on today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp. HELP.com/locked-on. Minnesota quarterback Max Brosmer transferred from the University of New Hampshire. Anybody remember Dylan Laub, the running back who killed it at the Senior Bowl? I think he was a 4th, 5th round pick. He was a star running back there. That was his quarterback. Listed at 6'2", 225 pounds, and a guy that, for me, you talk about technically refined as a passer, even shoulders, front side close, loading the back hip, trusting the turn and torque of his hips and his core, good arm talents, quick, snappy release. He has enough velocity to access the middle of the field on a consistent basis, throws with good touch, timing, and anticipation. This is a guy that, to me, and he's also a functional athlete, like where they ran some like QB zone read, different things like that. He was able to make some plays with his legs. I remember reading the interview I think he did where either his coach or his dad was joking about how people didn't think he had any athleticism and he was a pure pocket passer. And you can see it on tape, like he can gear up and get up to top speed and make some plays straight line. Is he going to be able to do a lot laterally? No, but if the edge rush gets behind him or gets past him and there's an alley that opens up on the interior, he can take it and get you 10 to 12 yards pretty easily, in my opinion. Just watching him, I appreciate the football IQ, the ability to read coverages pre and post snap, talking about identifying the safeties. And as we know, safeties usually tell the shell of the coverage a lot of times, especially pre-snap. So he does a good job. I can't remember which it was, maybe against Delaware, where it looked like too high. It looked like it was like cover 4, and they had kind of like almost 4 verts to kind of pull the safety a little bit closer to the hash, and he just threw a nice seam ball right to the slot receiver. In between the outside corner and the safety. He sees things well. He will check the ball down. This is a high instinct, high football IQ player. Now, the kind of drawbacks about him, he in high school he tore his LCL, and I think it was his freshman year or early in his college career he tore his ACL. Right, so he had 2 serious knee injuries, but he's played, I think, back-to-back seasons fully healthy. Negotiating interior pressure in his face, if you can get pressure in his face, it does force him to more so make those fadeaway throws. They talk about off the back foot, not standing tall, stuff like that. The level of competition, there's going to be a lot of people who's going to question it until we see him for Minnesota against these Big Ten defenses, and that's going to be a challenge for him, going from the SCS to then seeing Iowa, Ohio State, Michigan, right? And don't get it twisted. I talked about Minnesota I talked about Daniel Jackson. They have another receiver over there who's a baller too, that I'm going to get into his profile soon as well. So they have weapons in Minnesota. I think this young man has a real chance to elevate himself. I gave him a high 4th round grade. I had to walk myself back from a 3rd. Like I said, I met him 2 years ago at the QB, at one of the QB camps, and I met him there. The young man was, when you talk about business minded, like that was a business trip for him. Like he was out there just locked in, listening to everything the coaches were telling him. with the flight school and everything, understanding where he was making mistakes, where he needed to be better. And you could just see that type of process with this young man. I think going to Minnesota was a big thing for him, especially now you go out there, Power 5, you're going to be in some big games, bright lights with all these other, Oregon, the Big Ten has grown and everything. They're the second biggest, conference after the SEC. And they're right, to me, they're right up there with them in terms of talent. There's a lot of talent in this conference, man.
We'll have to talk about that.
Don't start that. But yeah, Max Brosmer has a very big shot, Keith, and I'm excited to see him in this Minnesota offense, man, because with PJ Fleck, we know he's a good coach and everything. He's recruited well. He just hasn't had the quarterback play to really elevate his offense.
I want to ask, because you said sleeper quarterback, what part are people sleeping on? Is the fact that he's an NFL draft prospect? Is the fact that this guy's a potential first rounder? Is it the fact that this guy can go through 40 touchdowns and we talking about him in the Heisman race? So from what you've seen at Rhode Island, right? I'm trying to make sure.
New Hampshire.
See that whole little area of the country. You gotta, you know what I'm saying? It's all the same, DP. But what part are they sleeping on when you talk about he's a sleeper quarterback? Like, what's his ceiling? What are the expectations in floor?
From his skill set, man, I'd keep the buck, Keith. If he played the way he played in New Hampshire in the Power 5 for 2-3 straight years, he would probably be a second-round quarterback for me.
Damn. Okay.
Like, I think he has all the talent. And like I said, seeing him up in person, being able to gauge the arm strength, he throws with good velocity, but the accuracy, he pushes the ball not just down the field, but he pushes it. I like guys that push it out in front of his receivers, right? Like, don't underthrow it. Push the ball down the field where those guys can catch it in stride. And it's not just a 50-yard play and they're tackled. It's a 70-yard play because they got 20 yards after the catch and they just scored. He has that type of ability as accuracy, ball placement. This is a guy that actually can attack every blade of grass on the field, in my opinion. And now going to a Power 5 school where I just think he's a sleeper because people don't know about him. Like, people don't know anything about him. So people are like, if they hear the name Max Brosmer, like, we'll see. You know what I mean? Like, Big Ten fans are like, he's from New Hampshire. We're not worried about him. And it's like, then you line up and it's like, oh, we in a ball game against this guy. I think he has day 2 type of talent. Of course, the medicals, like making sure his knee is fine. Like I said, he's played 2 straight years and everything. He missed a year because of the COVID, because the whole, they didn't play a lot during COVID for the FCS. But I think this is a kid I'm probably going to be high on. And I just hope that what I saw on tape from New Hampshire translates to Minnesota, because if so, we're going to be talking about him come April next year.
Okay, cool. No, I like that. And you're talking about a guy that's totally off the radar, right? And that's why we jump into the scouting process. And that's why it's so early on we talk about creating lists and things like that. And I'm excited to see, because it's always these teams that come out of nowhere, and it's usually one quarterback prospect that somebody's underrating, right? If Minnesota, instead of winning 6-7 games, right, they win 10 games, then that throws off a lot of other situations, right? And then usually the quarterback, he's throwing the football, right? What happens out of that? Then you're usually going to get some type of wide receiver prospect, right? That we were not expecting, that's putting up big numbers, that's highly skilled and highly talented. And at the very worst, DP, if he's good, guess what? We get more good college football. We get more matchups, more intrigue, and more conversation. So now I'm excited to get eyes on that guy, just to see what he's able to do at Minnesota. And you're talking about, I wonder if it's just one of those situations where Minnesota evaluated him properly and the rest of these big time schools, they skipped over him in the process. And if they did, well, they're gonna have to get this transfer portal situation right. There's one of those things where you go, what they say, no stone unturned. I think no stone unturned.
I'm sure that I wouldn't be shocked if the Senior Bowl and Jim Nagy them already looking at him, but I know for a fact that the staff over at the Shrine, because I talked to Eric Galco at that same camp, and that was the guy that stood out to us the most, him and the young kid at Maryland, and we both looked at him like, yo, this is a professional quarterback. We just got to see him stay healthy. So, and I think I think he ditched the knee brace and everything too. So I think he's playing without it now. So he should be good to go. But definitely, I'm pretty sure he's on the Shrine Bowl roster. No, not roster, but on their radar for 2025.
Okay, cool. DP, let's keep this thing going and flowing. I'm up next. I'm back on deck, DP. You passed the rock back to me, man. And I have to talk about this playmaker, Mr. Deion Burks. The Purdue transfer is on the way to he's on his way to Oklahoma. Talk about his skill set and what high grade did I give Mr. Deion Burks? Coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. Guys, right now on the FanDuel Sportsbook app, you can already get in on the betting odds for college football, Heisman, national championship odds, college football playoff odds, and so much more. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon to start making the most out of your summer. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. Because FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. Keith, Deion Burks, transfer from Purdue to Oklahoma, listed as 5'9", 190 pounds. And this is a guy, I remember watching that Purdue game against Michigan. He had some success against our guy, Will Johnson. Now, I didn't have like 100 yards against him or nothing like that, but he showcased some good things on tape, just from that game going against a high-profile cornerback. How high are you on Deion Burks right now?
Man, I like him a lot. I like him a lot to the point to where I said this guy is somewhere in between Zay Flowers, right, which he can elevate himself potentially into the first round with the right amount of production, and maybe like a Rondale Robinson who went in the third round, right? And we know that Rondale hasn't been as productive, but I can see him in that mode and him being a playmaker into where people watch him on Saturdays, not, especially if he's at Oklahoma and they have a good offense, they're explosive. And basically, if it's vintage Oklahoma, right, they're pushing the ball down the field, big plays, big situations. The other guy that I thought about, even with him just wearing an Oklahoma jersey, is Marvin Mims. And Marvin Mims, honestly, was a guy that through the draft process, nobody really talked about a lot. I know me and you discussed him some because we did like Marvin Mims, and I think we both had second-round grades on him, I believe, and that's where he went in the second round. I think that he has that potential and opportunity to get some things done as far as just being explosive, shifty, quick twitch, versatile alignment. He lines up on the outside at 5'11", 195. He battled with Will Johnson. Like I said, he lost some battles, he won some battles. But if you're talking about potentially the #1 corner in the entire nation, right, #1 player on my board right now, and he battled his butt off. So I'm like, okay, you get a lot of respect for that. And I can see just with his athletic skill set, how he can make it difficult for a lot of defensive backs, just how quick twitch and explosive he is.
And it's crazy when you bring up like Wandale Robinson, like, and I think he's similar in stature too. And like when I I was watching him, I looked at his build and
it's
Rondale Moore.
He's listed at 5'11", 195.
So yeah, like and so when I looked at him, I was like, man, he looks a lot like Rondale Moore. But I felt like when I watched those reps, I felt like he had a better feel as a wide receiver than Rondale Moore. And now, granted, Rondale Moore dealt with injuries and stuff, so he didn't fully develop at Purdue, but he was more of a gadget player, where I looked at Deion and I said, man, like route running, tempo, attacking leverage, like I felt like he was more advanced than watching Rondale. I think Rondale might be the better athlete because he was just so explosive, but not that Deion doesn't have enough explosiveness himself. I think, and Rondale went, second round, Keith? Like I think early in the second round.
He did. Yeah, he went early in the second round. So this is just a guy that nobody's just flat out talking about. Because I think the tools that he has as far as being one of those quick twitch, big playmaker type guys, they're there. And I think that's the part I appreciate, because you go back to Zay Flowers, and I think the initial evaluation on him was like, oh man, he's slot only type guy. He's smaller. But when you really dove into the film, and like you said, he understood how to attack leverages, he understood releases, he understood, just how to stem cornerbacks properly, right? And he's like, okay, well, this guy can line up on the outside, right? Like he's not just a slot only, and that's the feeling that I got from Deion Burks. And to be completely honest, they lined him up on the outside a great deal. Like, and we know offenses now, they usually just want to kick the small guy inside and make it easy for him. But I appreciated his time at Purdue, right? We'll see what happens at Oklahoma, but lining him up on the outside, force him to win in those condensed spaces and boxes. And then you can make it easy on him if you want to put him in motion and then line him up in the slot. So Deion Burks, yeah, definitely impressive wide receiver. I feel comfortable at this moment, right? And if you're just talking about no Oklahoma film played, XYZ, stuff like that, just based off of Purdue, I would just say this is a top 100 prospect that just nobody has really discovered yet. I feel comfortable about that. Now, we'll see what he does at Oklahoma this year, DP, but I would say that he's a top 100 prospect that nobody's discussing.
No, I mean, I think the situation at Oklahoma, I think they have the other talented receiver, Nick Anderson, who's there, still there, but they have, is it Jackson Arnold? Yeah, the highly touted recruit Jackson Arnold at quarterback. Purdue, Aiden O'Connell was their best quarterback over the past couple of years. He's with the Raiders. So I'm not surprised that he probably went to Oklahoma for better quarterback play or potentially better quarterback play with Dylan Gabriel now in Oregon and everything. Either way, he would have been fine from a quarterback standpoint to really – because you talk about it all the time, Keith, receivers are dependent on the quarterback. And if the quarterback can't get you the ball the way you need to and everything, like it can limit what you're able to do. And this is a young man that 629 receiving yards, 7 receiving touchdowns, 47 receptions. You get him in an offense where he's going to get more high quality targets in those and receptions. Like those numbers are going to go up. And in the Big Ten, in the Oklahoma, which is now in the SEC, like again, bright lights, big moments. A lot of talented cornerbacks, talking about battle tested coming out of there. He can be on the radar for a guy to be, right in that range of Rondale Moore if he has a big leap in 2024.
Yeah, I agree. I'm one quarterback away from saying that, right? Like that he has a good quarterback. He's going to be a very popular draft prospect once people dive all the way into the film on him, and we'll just see how it goes. But I know I was aggressive with his grade, right? Because you can battle back and forth, say, nobody knows about him yet. But I just went aggressive. I went, seen the skill set, the tools that I like, and I said, you know what? This is where I'm going to place this guy in DP. Sometimes that's how it goes in scouting, DP. You just got to be on the ledge. You got to be on the hill by yourself for a while till other people climb up that hill. That's just how the process goes. But DP, that wraps up another episode, man, of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to say shout out to everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day, man. Go hit that like button. Don't forget to comment and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On NFL Draft. I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at The Talent Code. That right there is my guy, my co-host on the ones and twos, Mr. Damian Parson. You can find him on X at DP_NFL. Like we always like to say, man, y'all come talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts, to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. On tomorrow's show, Wednesday, we got a middle of the week mock draft. Not mock draft Monday, mock draft Wednesday. PFN dropped another mock. We want to get into it and see where some of these prospects are falling, any surprise QB landing spots, all that on tomorrow's show. So come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.